Vivian, turn yourself in. Charles's voice was like quenched ice, smashing into my heart. Consider it as repaying me for the 10 years of care I've given you. I had pursued him for 10 years, like a dog wagging its tail and begging for pity. But now, he wanted me to take the blame for his beloved white moonlight in a hit-and-run accident. He said Anna's hands were meant for painting and couldn't be ruined in prison. What about me? Could my life be trampled upon so casually? Vivian, turn yourself in. Charles sat across from me, his expensive custom suit without a single wrinkle, making his strikingly handsome face appear even more indifferent. Between his slender fingers was a document, his nails trimmed neatly and cleanly, just like him, always dignified, always meticulous. He pushed the document toward me, his voice devoid of any warmth. Anna was driving last night and accidentally hit someone. Go turn yourself in now and admit that you were the one driving. My blood seemed to freeze in that instant. I looked at him in disbelief, this man I had loved for a full 10 years, wondering if I was hallucinating. What did you say? My voice was dry like sandpaper rubbing. I said, you take the blame for Anna. Charles's tone carried a hint of impatience, as if discussing something utterly ordinary. She can't be in trouble. Her hands belong to the top young painter in the country, her future is boundless and can't be stained by such a trivial matter. Trivial matter? A buzz rang in my head, like countless bees swarming madly. A hit-and-run accident, in his mouth, was merely a trivial matter? My gaze fell on the document on the table. It was a pre-drafted surrender statement, detailing how I had, at 9 o'clock last night on Qingjiang Road in the southern part of the city, due to improper operation, knocked down a pedestrian and, in a moment of panic, fled the scene by car. Every word was like a red-hot iron, scorching my heart fiercely. Charles, I almost squeezed these words through my teeth, what makes you think I'll agree? He finally lifted his eyes, those deep eyes that had once drowned me in countless days and nights, now left only with cold scrutiny. Vivian, for these 10 years, you've eaten my food, lived in my house, every piece of clothing you wear, every bag you use, which one wasn't given by me? Now, it's just asking you to do me a small favor. Are you really going to refuse? He paused, his tone carrying a hint of contemptuous charity. Don't worry, I've arranged everything. The best lawyer will fight for probation for you, even if you have to go in, it'll be at most a year or so. When you get out, I'll give you a sum of money, enough for you to live worry-free for the rest of your life. Money? I laughed, laughing until tears nearly came out. So, my 10 years of youth, 10 years of devoted pursuit, in his eyes, was nothing but a transaction that could be measured with money. 10 years ago, my family fell into ruin, my father jumped off a building, my mother fell ill. It was Charles who descended like a god, clearing all my debts and pulling me out of the mire. From that day on, I followed him, becoming his most obedient assistant, his most intimate bed partner, his most unseen shadow. I thought that as long as I worked hard enough, was sensible enough, one day he would see my goodness and fall in love with me. I learned cooking, flower arrangement, management for him, shaping myself into exactly what he needed. His stomach was weak, so for 10 years without fail, I prepared stomach-nourishing soups for him. He had a cleanliness obsession, so I kept his villa spotless. When he needed me, I was there at his call, and when he didn't, I quietly vanished. Everyone around me said I was foolish, that Charles just treated me like a high-end nanny. But I always refused to believe it, stubbornly thinking that he must have felt something different for me. Until today, until this moment. He wanted me to sacrifice my life for another woman's. What if I don't? I stared at him intently, trying to find even the slightest trace of emotion on his face, even guilt. However, there was none. His face was only indifferent, as if I were just a disobedient object. Vivian, I'm not discussing this with you. His voice turned completely cold. You have no choice. Think about your mother still in the hospital, her medical bills have always been paid by me. This was a threat. Blatant, undisguised threat. My heart felt like it was being gripped tightly by an invisible hand, hurting so much I couldn't breathe. Yes, how could I forget? My greatest weakness had always been in his hands. At that moment, light footsteps came from the stairs on the second floor of the villa. I looked up and saw Anna wearing Charles's white shirt, barefoot, timidly standing at the landing. Her pure and beautiful face was streaked with tears, her eyes swollen like walnuts, evoking pity. "Charles," her voice trembled with a sob, "don't force Sister Vivian, it's all my fault, I'll turn myself in." As she spoke, she made a move to rush down. Charles immediately stood up, striding over in one step, holding her tightly in his arms, his tone unprecedentedly gentle and heartache. "Nonsense. What does this have to do with you? You were terrified last night, rest well upstairs, I'll handle things here." He held her, coaxing her softly, as if protecting a rare treasure. And I, like an outsider, a ridiculous clown, sat in this cold living room, watching them perform their deep affection. Anna buried her face in Charles's chest, her shoulders heaving with sobs, yet through the gap in Charles's arm, she cast me a provocative, triumphant glance. In that instant, I understood everything. What accident, what terror, it was all a carefully designed play by her. A play to completely drive me away from Charles's side. And Charles willingly paved all the roads for her, even if the cost was destroying me. I watched as Charles gently kissed away the tears on Anna's face, then turned his head, looking at me with an extremely cold gaze, as if saying, "See? This is the difference between you and her." My heart died completely in that moment. 10 years of obsession, 10 years of following, turned out to be nothing but a self-indulgent joke. I slowly stood up, picking up the surrender statement from the table, my fingertips slightly pale from the force. "Fine." I heard my own voice, calm like stagnant water, "I agree." Charles's face showed no surprise, as if everything was under control. He released Anna, walking back to me, his tone softening a bit. "That's right. Vivian, you're a smart woman." I looked at him and suddenly smiled, smiling brilliantly, making him slightly furrow his brows. "But I have one condition." Charles's brows furrowed deeper, seemingly not expecting me to dare propose a condition. "Speak." He was sparing with words, his eyes already carrying a warning. Facing his cold gaze, I said clearly, word by word, "I want you to marry me." The air froze instantly. Charles's face showed an astonishment I had never seen, as if hearing the biggest joke. Behind him, Anna's face turned ashen, her fingers gripping the stair railing so hard that her knuckles protruded. "Vivian, are you insane?" Charles's voice seemed squeezed through his teeth, carrying a dangerous aura. "I'm not insane." I smiled even more unrestrainedly, the 10 years of repression and grievances turning into desperate madness in this moment. "Charles, didn't you say you'd compensate me? Then compensate me with the status of your wife. Don't worry, I won't really make you fulfill husbandly duties, I just want the title, a wedding. I want everyone to know that I, Vivian, am your lawfully wedded wife." I watched his face darken instantly and continued, "As long as you agree, after the wedding, I'll turn myself in. Otherwise, not only will I not take the blame, but I'll also tell the police that Anna was driving, and you, Charles, were behind instructing me to perjure myself. You dare threaten me?" Charles's eyes burst with terrifying anger, he approached me step by step, the powerful oppression almost suffocating me. "What don't I dare?" I straightened my back, fearlessly meeting his gaze. "Charles, I've followed you for 10 years, my life is already ruined, what's a bit more ruin? The barefoot aren't afraid of those wearing shoes, at worst, we'll perish together." In 10 years, this was the first time I was so assertive in front of him. I saw shock in his eyes, and a trace of, complex emotion I couldn't understand. "Charles." Anna's sobbing voice came from behind, "Don't agree to her. How can she make such an excessive demand?" Charles didn't turn back, he just stared at me intently, as if trying to see through me entirely. After a long time, his tense jawline slightly relaxed. "Fine." He squeezed out a word through his teeth, "I agree." I won. Using everything I had left, I gambled and won this final round. But in my heart, there was no joy, only an endless desolation. Charles moved quickly, or rather, he was eager to end this farce. 3 days later, a grand yet hasty wedding was held at the city's most luxurious hotel. I wore an expensive custom wedding dress, standing in front of the mirror, looking at the woman inside with exquisite makeup but a bloodless face, feeling waves of unfamiliarity. The makeup artist was still sighing in my ear, "Vivian, you are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen, Mr. Charles is so fortunate." I tugged at the corners of my mouth but couldn't smile. This wedding had no relatives or friends, no blessings, only countless reporters and flashing lights. Charles needed this wedding to announce to the world, to silence everyone, and to give me, this scapegoat, a substantial enough compensation. The wedding march played, I linked arms with Charles, walking step by step down the red carpet. He was still impeccably handsome, with a formulaic smile on his lips, but I could feel the stiffness in his arm and the undisguised disgust in his eyes. I knew he was enduring. Enduring this performance he saw as utterly absurd. The priest recited the standard vows in front of us. For richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love her, care for her, respect her, accept her, and be faithful to her forever until the end of life. I saw Charles's thin lips part slightly, uttering two words, "I do." The voice was light like a feather, yet it smashed heavily into my heart. It was my turn. I looked at him, this man I had loved for 10 years, this man who was about to personally send me to hell, suddenly wanting to ask if in these 10 years, he had ever, even for a moment, felt something for me. But I didn't ask. Because the answer was already self-evident. "I do," I said. When exchanging rings, his cold fingertips touched my skin, and I couldn't help but flinch. The diamond ring was large and sparkling, yet like a cold handcuff, locking me tightly. The last part of the wedding was the groom kissing the bride. Charles lowered his head, his handsome face enlarging before my eyes. I could smell the fresh cologne on him, his favorite scent. I closed my eyes, waiting for the kiss I had longed for 10 years. However, his lips merely brushed my forehead like a dragonfly skimming water. Cold, and full of humiliation. The flashing lights below the stage went wild, recording this affectionate moment. Only I knew that this grand wedding was merely the prelude to my descent into hell. On the night the wedding ended, Charles didn't return. I guarded the empty bridal chamber alone, without even removing the wedding dress, waiting from dawn to dusk, and from dusk to dawn. The next morning, I received a call from Charles. "Had enough fun?" His voice was cold as ice. "Now, it's time to fulfill your promise." I held the phone, silent for a long time. "Charles, how is the person who was hit now?" This was the question I had always wanted to ask but dared not. The other end was silent for a few seconds, then came his emotionless voice, still in intensive care, "Won't die." My heart sank suddenly. Remember, his voice rang again, with an undeniable command, "At the police station, you know what to say and what not to. If you try any tricks, you know the consequences." With that, he hung up. I listened to the busy tone, slowly squatting down, burying my face in my knees. "Vivian, you're so foolish. At this point, what are you still expecting?" I took off the wedding dress symbolizing a joke, changed into the simplest clothes, without makeup, and walked out of this luxurious cage with a bare face. In the police station, the bright lights stung my eyes. I recited the surrender statement word for word as Charles had taught me. It was me driving. I fled because I was scared. I'm willing to take all legal responsibility. The young police officer taking the statement looked at me with eyes full of inquiry and suspicion. "Vivian," he closed the statement book, "are you sure everything you said is the truth?" I looked up, meeting his sharp gaze, my heart skipping a beat uncontrollably. "I'm sure." I lowered my eyes, hiding all emotions. The young officer didn't press further, just stood up and said to me, "Since you've surrendered, per procedure, we need to detain you. If you have anything to say, you can contact your lawyer now." I shook my head, no. From beginning to end, the best lawyer Charles had arranged for me never appeared once. The moment the handcuffs were put on, the cold metal sensation from my wrists chilled all the way to my heart. I was led to the detention room. Passing an office, I inadvertently glimpsed the news playing on the TV inside. It is reported that the identity of the victim in the Xinjiang road accident has been confirmed as Ms. Grace, the director of the South City Welfare Institute. Grace. This name exploded like thunder in my mind. I stopped abruptly, staring fixedly at the familiar and kind face on the TV screen. That was the director of the Welfare Institute where I grew up, the Grace who picked me up from the street and gave me a home. How could it be her? How could it possibly be her? A chill surged from the soles of my feet to the top of my head, my blood seeming to freeze. I frantically broke free from the police beside me, rushing to the office door, clinging tightly to the doorframe, eyes unblinking on the black and white photo on the screen. Grace. I murmured, tears bursting forth instantly. Charles, you told me the hit person was in ICU, wouldn't die. But the news clearly stated, the victim died this morning due to failed resuscitation. He lied to me. From start to finish, he lied to me. He not only wanted me to take the blame for Anna, but also to take it for the murderer who killed my closest kin. Ah! A shrill scream, unlike any human sound, burst from my throat. My vision blackened, and I completely lost consciousness. When I woke again, it was in the detention center's infirmary. The pungent smell of disinfectant, the white walls and ceiling dazzling my eyes painfully. You're awake? A gentle female voice sounded by my ear. It was the detention center's doctor. Seeing me open my eyes, she handed me a cup of warm water. You were too emotional and fainted. Drink some water. I didn't take it, just staring blankly at the ceiling, replaying the news and Grace's kind face over and over in my mind. Grace, the woman who gave me a second life. I had no parents, growing up in the Welfare Institute on charity. It was Grace who, with her meager salary, supported my education and taught me how to be a person. She always said, our Vivian is her proudest child. After my father's company went bankrupt, I was desperate. It was Grace who took out all her savings, stuffing them into my hands to help. Though that money was a drop in the bucket, that kindness I could never repay in a lifetime. Later, after following Charles, life improved. I anonymously sent large sums to the Welfare Institute monthly and funded renovations. I didn't dare go back to see her, fearing she'd be disappointed knowing my unseemly life. I always thought, once I saved enough, I'd leave Charles, return to her honorably, tell her that her Vivian hadn't disappointed her. But I no longer had that chance. And I nearly became the scapegoat for her murderer. How absurd, how laughable. My heart felt torn by poisoned claws, pain to numbness. Tears slid silently, soaking the pillow. Charles, Anna. I chewed these names over and over, towering hatred sprouting madly from my heart's depths, entwining every nerve like vines. I wouldn't let it go. Absolutely not. Doctor, I hoarsely spoke, I want to see my lawyer. The doctor paused, then nodded, okay, I'll contact them for you. I wasn't waiting for the top lawyer Charles arranged, but a number I'd saved privately for a long time. His name was Ethan, an obscure but highly just young lawyer. I'd met him at a charity event and kept him in mind. Ethan arrived quickly. In the meeting room, I told him everything truthfully, including my relationship with Charles, Anna's actions, and how Charles coerced me to take the blame. After listening, Ethan's face was extremely grave. Miss Vivian, do you have evidence for what you've said? He asked calmly. I shook my head. For 10 years, I lived under Charles's wings, like a caged canary, naively thinking that was the whole world. I had no defenses, let alone left any evidence against him. That absurd wedding, that threatening call, no recordings. Ethan's brows furrowed tightly. This is tricky. You know better than I what kind of person Charles is in business. He leaves no traces, he's surely handled the police side. If you recant now without solid evidence, they'll just think you're denying out of fear, and it might even aggravate your crime. My heart sank bit by bit. Was there really no way? Was I to watch Anna the murderer go free, Charles the executioner continue triumphantly? I was unwilling. There must be a way. I grabbed Ethan's arm, like clutching the last straw. Attorney Ethan, please, you must help me. As long as they get the punishment they deserve, I'll do anything. Ethan looked at my red eyes, silent for a moment, sighed, "There's a way, but it's very dangerous." "I'm not afraid. Charles and Anna must think you've pleaded guilty and are resting easy. This is our only chance." Ethan's eyes sharpened. "What we need to do is make them reveal their own flaws." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen, next, you do this." After hearing Ethan's plan, my back broke out in cold sweat. It was a risky move. One wrong step, eternal doom. But I had no hesitation. From the moment I learned of Grace's death, I was already in hell. Now, I just wanted to drag those two culprits down with me. Following Ethan's deployment, I applied for bail pending trial. The reason was that I was Charles's newlywed wife, special status, had confessed, good attitude, no flight risk. Charles probably got wind of it, perhaps wanting me to suffer less to ease his conscience. He actually used connections to approve my application. The moment I walked out of the detention center, the sunlight stung my eyes. At the door was a black Bentley I knew all too well. Charles leaned on the car door, in well-tailored casual wear. Seeing me, he extinguished his cigarette and walked toward me. "You've suffered," he said faintly, tone emotionless. Looking at his hypocritical face, my stomach churned. I lowered my eyes, feigning submission, softly saying, "It's okay." He seemed satisfied with my sensibility, opening the car door. "Get in, I'll take you somewhere." The car sped along, finally stopping at a luxurious riverside apartment building. "This is the house I prepared for you." Charles led me into a luxuriously decorated large flat. "I've arranged the best caregiver for your mother. From today, live here, don't wander. Once the heat dies down, I'll send you abroad." He stood by the huge floor-to-ceiling window, back to me, voice as cold as ever. "Vivian, forget the past, start a new life." "New life?" I looked at his back, sneering inwardly. "Charles, you destroyed everything of mine, now hypocritically telling me to start anew?" "Don't worry, I will. Once I personally send you to prison, I'll start my new life." "Thank you, Charles." I stepped forward, gently hugging his lean waist from behind, pressing my face to his broad back, voice choked. "I knew you still had me in your heart." I felt his body stiffen instantly. In 10 years, except in bed, I rarely initiated such intimate contact. He didn't push me away, but didn't respond either. "Charles," I continued my act, voice full of grievance and attachment, "I'm scared living here alone. Can you stay tonight to accompany me?" Charles stayed in the end. Perhaps out of guilt, or needing a place to escape Anna's pressure. At night, I lay beside him, an arm's length away, clearly smelling his familiar scent, but no longer the initial palpitations, only bone-deep cold and loathing. I pretended to sleep restlessly, turning and rolling into his arms, hand casually on his chest. "Don't move," he said with closed eyes, voice hoarse, with a warning. But as if not hearing, my fingers circled his chest, voice light and soft, with dreamlike murmur. "Charles, have you ever loved me? Even a little?" He abruptly opened his eyes, in the dark, his gaze sharp like an eagle. "Vivian, don't push it. I just want to know." I lifted my head, meeting his gaze, eyes brimming with tears, looking pitiful. 10 years, I've followed you for 10 years, I just want an answer. Is it that hard?" He looked at me, eyes complex. After a long time, he averted his gaze, stiffly uttering 2 words, "Sleep." No admission, but no denial. In the past, this might have made me ecstatic. But now, it only disgusted me. I didn't press, just buried my face in his chest, smiling silently. "Charles, your biggest weakness is your arrogance. You think you control everything, that I'm still the Vivian who obeys you. You'll soon know how wrong you are." In the following days, I played the perfect disheartened role. During the day, I locked myself in the apartment, going nowhere. Charles occasionally came, bringing luxuries from around the world, bags, jewelry, clothes, like appeasing a pet. And I accepted them all, face showing submission with a trace of sorrow, perfectly satisfying his control desire and that ridiculous guilt. At night, I'd use all my wiles to seduce him. wearing his favorite silk nightgown, preparing perfectly tempered bath water, quietly accompanying him while he worked, serving tea and water. At first, he resisted, but men are sensory creatures. Under my deliberate catering, his tense defenses finally crumbled bit by bit. He started staying overnight, responding in bed. Each time I endured disgust, writhing under him, then when he slept, quietly rose, went to the bathroom, scrubbing my body repeatedly until skin reddened, as if washing away his dirty marks. All this was in Ethan's plan. Ethan said Charles was extremely arrogant and suspicious. What I needed was to rebuild trust, make him believe I'd resigned, become a daughter appeased by money and a bit of warmth. Only then would he lower his guard. The opportunity came half a month later one evening. That day, Charles drank a lot, returning to the apartment reeking of alcohol. As usual, I helped remove his coat, supported him to the sofa, then went to the kitchen to brew hangover soup. He leaned on the sofa, eyes closed, brows furrowed, looking pained. I carried the soup over, sat beside him, softly saying, "Charles, drink some soup, it'll make you feel better." He didn't open his eyes, just mumbled a response. I scooped a spoonful, blew on it, brought it to his lips. But he suddenly grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Vivian," he opened his eyes, his pupils deepened by alcohol, surging with emotions I couldn't read. "Do you hate me?" My heart jumped, but I forced a smile uglier than crying. How could I? "I know you had no choice." "No choice?" He suddenly sneered, the laugh full of self-mockery. "Yes, no choice." He released my hand, took the bowl, drank it in one gulp. Then, he placed the empty bowl heavily on the coffee table, making a piercing sound. "Do you know? Anna, her mental state has been bad lately." He looked at me, eyes with unprecedented fatigue and struggle. "She always has nightmares, says someone wants to harm her. She won't paint, locks herself in her room, sees no one." My heart sank. Anna was guilty conscience-stricken. Then, what to do? I feigned concern. "What can I do?" Charles irritably grabbed his hair. "I've erased all traces. The intersection surveillance happened to be broken. The only witness, I paid off with money. Now, besides us three, no fourth person knows the truth." He said it casually, but I felt chilled all over. So, he'd arranged everything long ago. Surveillance broken? Only witness? No such coincidences in the world. But she's still afraid. Charles's voice full of helplessness. "She says she always feels that person watching her." "That person, meaning Grace?" "Serves her right." I sneered inwardly, but showed heartache, hand stroking his brow. "Charles, don't worry too much. Miss Anna is just not over it yet, she'll be fine in time." My fingertips cold, touching his skin, he grabbed my hand as if scalded. "Vivian," he stared intensely, gaze burning. "Sometimes, I really don't know who I owe more, you or her." This sentence slapped me hard. At this point, he was still calculating what he owed me and Anna. I suppressed the urge to slap him, pulled my hand free, stood, back to him, voice sobbing. "Don't say it, I know, how can I compare to Miss Anna? She's your heart's treasure, I'm just something you picked up on a whim." I acted immersed, shoulders trembling with grievance. Behind, long silence. Just as I thought he wouldn't say more, he suddenly hugged me from behind. His chin on my shoulder, warm breath on my ear, voice low and hoarse. "I'm sorry." This was the first time he said sorry to me. In the past, I'd have been moved to tears. But now, I found it utterly ironic. "Vivian," he hugged tightly, as if melding me into his bones, "give me a little more time. Once this is over, Anna's exhibition successful, I'll handle everything. Then, He didn't finish, but I knew what he meant. Then, he'd give me an explanation. What a ridiculous promise. I turned, raised my hands, wrapped around his neck, tiptoed, kissed his lips. "Charles, I believe you." My voice gentle enough to wring water. But my other hand behind pressed the pocket pen that was already recording. Ethan was right, Charles was too arrogant. He thought he controlled everything, unaware that every word he spoke would become iron evidence sending him and Anna to hell. With the recording in hand, I didn't give it to Ethan immediately. Because I knew it wasn't enough. Charles admitted erasing traces and paying the witness, proving post facto sheltering, but not directly that Anna was the culprit. If he insisted he did it thinking I was the driver, to protect his new wife, the recording's power would diminish greatly. What I wanted was to make them never recover. I needed more direct evidence, one nailing Anna to the pillar of shame. The breakthrough was still with Anna. Charles said Anna's mental state was bad lately. A guilty person's heart is fragile, especially Anna, the artist always well protected by Charles. What I needed was to crush her psychological defenses. I started subtly inquiring about Anna from Charles. When does Miss Anna's exhibition start? I asked casually while massaging his shoulders. The 15th next month, at the City Art Museum. Charles, eyes closed, enjoying my service, tone with subtle pride, it's her 3-year prepared solo show, very important to her. Can I go see it? I asked softly, I've never seen Miss Anna paint, it must be beautiful. Charles opened his eyes, looked at me, gaze complex, but nodded, go if you want. He probably thought I wanted to please him, initiative to show goodwill to Anna. Only I knew I was going to see not the exhibition, but a good show. I contacted Ethan to handle something. On exhibition day, I dressed up specially. I chose a latest Chanel dress Charles gave me, exquisite makeup, looking radiant, unlike the legendary tragic taking blame for love role. When I arrived at the museum, the exhibition had started. Many celebrities and media were there, flashes continuous. Anna, today's star, in a white fairy dress, stood in the hall center, surrounded, face with proper reserved smile. And Charles stood beside her, like a guardian, eyes full of indulgence, blocking over-enthusiastic reporters. Talented man, beautiful woman, heaven-made match. What a beautiful picture. If ignoring under their feet were my and Grace's blood and bones. Holding champagne, I slowly walked toward them. My appearance caused a small stir. Everyone knew I was Charles's newlywed wife, yet here he stood with another woman. Charles and Anna saw me. Charles frowned immediately, eyes flashing displeasure. Anna's smile froze instantly, eyes showing panic and guilt. Why are you here? Charles approached, lowering voice, tone reproachful. Didn't you say I could come? I blinked, innocent, I'm here to support Miss Anna. Saying that, I bypassed him, went straight to Anna, smiling gracefully, Miss Anna, congratulations. Your paintings are truly beautiful. Anna forced a smile, thank you. Sister Vivian. Her voice trembled. I leaned close, whispering only we could hear, especially that redemption, painted so well. Black background, red bloodstains, a soul struggling in rainy night, very story-like. That redemption was the exhibition's highlight, hung prominently. On the painting, thick unmelting night, glaring headlight-piercing rain curtain, ground with eye-catching red snaking, shocking. Everyone said the painting was full of artistic tension, Anna's peak work. Only I knew it wasn't art, it was documentary. It was the true depiction of the night she killed Grace. She actually painted the murder scene, hung it boldly here, accepting praise. This woman was either mad or utterly cold-blooded. Hearing my words, Anna's face turned pale instantly, hand holding glass shaking. You, what nonsense. She looked at me in terror. Am I talking nonsense? My smile deepened, Miss Anna, do you sleep well every night? Do you dream of a kind old woman asking why you killed her? Shut up. Anna screamed like a cat with tail stepped on, her glass crashing to the ground, shattering. Her out-of-control reaction drew all eyes. Charles's face changed, rushing over, shielding her, shouting at me, Vivian. What are you trying to do? What did I do? I looked confused and aggrieved, I just praised Miss Anna's painting, why did she? Before I finished, the hall's big screen, originally looping Anna's paintings, suddenly switched to a black and white portrait of a kind old woman. It was Grace. Below the photo, bold red words, murderer, give back my mom's life. The crowd erupted. Everyone stunned, reporters' flashes going mad. Ah! Anna, seeing Grace's portrait, as if seeing a ghost, let out a shrill scream, hugging her head and squatting, shaking like a sieve. Not me. I didn't hit her. She rushed out herself. Not my fault. She screamed incoherently, completely collapsed. Charles's face was extremely ugly, trying to soothe the out-of-control Anna while yelling at security, "What are you standing for? Turn off the screen. Get the reporters out." The scene descended into utter chaos. And I, standing apart from the tumultuous crowd, watched it all unfold with cold detachment, witnessing those two people I had once loved and hated, step by step, march toward their own destruction right before my eyes. My pocket phone was recording video, capturing this spectacular scene completely. Anna, Charles, this good show was just beginning. The exhibition farce, like a storm, swept the city instantly. Young painter Anna suspected of hit and run, Shin Group CEO Charles shelters for love, tycoon secret, new wife is scapegoat. Various sensational titles, with Anna's on-site collapse video and Grace's kind portrait, quickly topped all news platforms. Public opinion exploded. Charles used all connections to suppress the news, but to no avail. Videos and photos spread like viruses, impossible to delete. On the net's other end, countless eyes and mouths formed a force to destroy all. Shin Group's stock plummeted overnight. And I, after detonating this bomb, quietly disappeared from the apartment Charles arranged. I moved into a safe house Ethan set up. It was an ordinary old neighborhood, isolated, yet gave me unprecedented peace. "This move of yours is really striking at the root." Ethan, looking at online news, thumbs up, but then worried, "But you've thoroughly enraged Charles. He's probably searching for you like mad." "I want to enrage him," I said coldly. "People only make mistakes when angry and panicked." My phone was long off, but I knew Charles must have called countless times. I could even imagine his furious, helpless look. This feeling was great. "What next?" Ethan asked. "Wait." I uttered one word. Wait for police involvement, for Charles and Anna to disorder themselves. As expected. The exhibition incident was too big, police had to intervene. The next day, the Bureau announced reinvestigating the Xinjiang hit and run. The first summoned was me. With Ethan, I entered the station again. This time, not suspect, but key witness. Receiving me was still the young officer, Liam. "Miss Vivian," Liam's expression serious, "we hope this time, you'll tell the truth." I nodded, handing all evidence, Charles's admission recording, Anna's exhibition collapse video, all to police. All my previous statements were false. Looking at Liam's eyes, clearly, I was coerced by Charles to take the blame for the real perpetrator Anna. I laid out how Charles threatened with my mother's medical fees, used a fake wedding to appease me, everything. Liam and colleagues' faces grew graver. "Miss Vivian, we'll verify this immediately." Liam closed the book, stood, solemnly, "Rest assured, if true, we won't let any criminal go, nor wrong any good person." Leaving the station, I saw Dawn's white belly. A new day began. And Charles and Anna's doomsday was finally coming. Police moved fast. That afternoon, Charles and Anna were summoned. Meanwhile, in Charles's villa garage, they found the Maserati. Though front repaired, techs extracted Grace's blood and fiber from chassis gaps. Irrefutable evidence. More fatal was the paid-off witness, a nearby construction worker. After exhibition video spread, he saw Grace's photo, recognized the hit elder. Conscience pricked, encouraged by wife, he went to police, returned the million hush money, testified the driver was a young beautiful woman, not the surrendering Vivian. All evidence formed a complete loop. Charles and Anna could no longer quibble. However, just as I thought it settled, an unexpected turn. Anna suddenly went mad in interrogation. She cried and laughed alternately, screamed of ghosts, huddled shaking in corner, muttering, "Not me, not me." Hospital psychiatric evaluation, acute stress disorder with schizophrenic symptoms. Meaning, she was now mentally ill. Per law, mentally ill not recognizing or controlling behavior causing harm, confirmed by procedure, bear no criminal liability. Charles's lawyers are using this to apply for Anna's criminal exemption. Ethan told me, face unusually ugly. My hand gripping the cup tightened suddenly, knuckles white. They wish. I gritted. Feigning madness? Anna, think this escapes punishment? You underestimate me, and Grace's spirit in heaven. Attorney Ethan, I looked up, eyes iced cold, remember? Charles mentioned something in that recording. Ethan paused, then realized, you mean Anna's mental state? Yes. I sneered. Charles admitted Anna post-incident was just mentally bad, always nightmares. Totally unlike mental illness. Someone who planned my blame-taking, painted murder scene to show off, how could be mentally ill? I get it. Ethan's eyes lit. That recording not only proves sheltering, but counters that Anna was mentally normal during and after crime. Her current madness is faked. Yes. I stood, walked to window, looking at gray sky, and I have a big gift for them. I dialed an unfamiliar number. It rang long before answered, a lazy charming female voice. Hello? Who? Hello, is this Miss Linda? I asked calmly. Silence a few seconds, tone alert, who are you? How do you know this number? Who I am doesn't matter. I said faintly, what's important is I want to discuss a deal. About Charles and Anna. Linda, Charles's ex-girlfriend, a star known for beauty and cunning in entertainment. Almost became Mrs. Charles back then. Legend said their breakup's real reason was Anna's intervention. Enemy's enemy is friend. I believed Linda would be very interested in my gift. Linda soon agreed to meet. We met at a very private tea house. She wore low-key black long dress, sunglasses, and mask, but couldn't hide her stunning face and strong aura. You're Vivian? She removed sunglasses, beautiful phoenix eyes unpolitely scanning me head to toe, tone probing and contemptuous, followed Charles 10 years, ending like this, you're really pathetic. Her words sharp, but I didn't care. I just looked calmly, Miss Linda, I'm not here for your evaluation. I have something you'll definitely be interested in. Saying that, I pushed a USB drive to her. Linda raised a brow, didn't take it immediately, looked interested. Oh? What? The truth of why you broke up with Charles back then. My words froze Linda's expression. Her laziness and playfulness vanished, replaced by cold gloom. What do you mean? Miss Linda and Mr. Charles were at marriage talks, but suddenly exposed for cheating scandal, reputation ruined overnight, forced abroad. I looked at her, slowly, did you really think those photos were paparazzis? Linda's face worsened, fingers tightening on cup. I continued, those photos angles, so clear, so perfect, impossible stealth shots. Miss Linda, ever thought it was a tailor-made honey trap for you? What are you saying? Linda's voice trembled. I smiled, pushed USB further, all answers inside. Of course, a bonus gift about Charles and his darling Anna. I think this gift is enough for your revenge. Linda stared at the USB, eyes surging with struggle, resentment, unwillingness. After long, she grabbed it, stood. Why should I believe you? You have no choice. I met her gaze, Miss Linda, are you resigned? Resigned to them destroying everything, watching them thrive while you linger abroad? This hit her sore spot. Her hand gripping USB, veins bulging. Fine. She squeezed through teeth, I'll see what you're selling. Then, sunglasses on, turned, left without looking back. Watching her resolute back, I sipped the cold tea. In the USB was a private detective I asked Ethan to find through special channels. That detective executed Linda's cheating gate back then. His employer was none other than Anna. Back then, Anna, seeing Linda about to marry Charles, jealous, used her painting earnings to hire the detective, set up Linda, leaked evidence to media, successfully alienated Linda and Charles. Charles, seeing photos, blinded by anger and jealousy, gave Linda no chance to explain, unilaterally broke up, completely blacklisted her. Linda, unable to defend, career and love ruined, left dimly. Anna, as gentle kind comforter, accompanied Charles, step by step became his heart's tip. As for the other gift in USB, naturally Charles and Anna's latest dirt. Linda was smart and ruthless. She knew how to use this for justice for herself and me. As expected, next day Linda held press conference. Before countless cameras, crying, she told how Anna framed her, Charles misunderstood, and released the detective's testimony recording. One stone stirred thousand waves. If the prior hit and run just trapped Charles and Anna in moral and legal vortex, Linda's revelation nailed them to humanity's shame pillar. So, the genius painter, pure as lotus Anna, was so vicious, scheming. The decisive business Charles was so stupid and blind in love. Net sentiment reversed shockingly. Prior sympathy for Anna's insanity turned to overwhelming curses. Viper beauty. Such people to hell. Charles is blind. For such woman, wronged Linda, forced Vivian to blame. Scum. Demand retrial. Can't let mental illness shield evil. Public pressure mountain like on justice system. At this time, unexpected call from Charles's mother, Denise. Vivian, I'm Charles's mom. The voice elegant but tired, can we meet? I didn't expect Denise to contact me. In 10 years, I'd only seen her distantly at Shin family gatherings. Always aloof, elegant, looking at me like insignificant object. Never acknowledged me, never spoke. I knew she looked down on me. We met in a high-end club's private room. Denise in proper cheapao, hair impeccable, though brows weary, still exuding upper-class aura. Sit. She pointed opposite, voice calm. I didn't sit, stood looking. Madame Denise, what is it? She looked up, eyes similar to Charles's, full of complex scrutiny. Vivian, I really underestimated you before. I tugged my mouth, silent. Name your price. She lifted blue and white teacup, blue steam, tone charitable. How much to stop? 50 million? 100 million? Take the money, leave, never appear, I can satisfy. I laughed. Madame Denise, do you think everything in the world can be solved with money? Denise's face sank, isn't it? You followed Charles for money? Now I give more, you should be satisfied. I followed Charles not for money. Looking at her, word by word, because I loved him. These words said frankly, but no initial thrill. Denise stunned, seemingly not expecting this. Her contempt added subtle touch. Love? As if hearing a joke, she sneered, can love be eaten? Vivian, you're too naive. In Shin family, love is the least valuable. Yes, I know now. Looking at her, eyes calm as dead water, so, I'm not here for money. I want justice. For me, and the old woman Anna killed. That old woman, I've sent people to handle. Denise said lightly, her family gets enough for lifetime comfort, they'll drop the suit. My heart sank. Grace had no family, her only kin were institute kids. Who did Denise mean by family? Think money lets you do anything? I glared, that's a life. Not measurable by money. Dead can't revive. Denise's tone still terrifyingly cold. Vivian, I'm not here to discuss right-wrong. I ask, what do you want? I want Anna imprisoned, Charles pay for his actions. Impossible. Denise slammed cup, tea splashing, Anna's mad, can't go to prison. As for Charles, Shin family's only son, group can't without him. I won't allow anyone to ruin him. Then see you in court. I dropped coldly, turning to leave. Stop. Madame Shin suddenly called. I stopped, didn't turn. Vivian, her voice with unprecedented near pleading, consider me begging, let Charles go, okay? I slowly turned, incredulously looking. The aloof Madame Shin begging me. Charles, he has his reasons. Denise's eyes red, voice choked, you know Anna's his treasure, but do you know why he protects her so? My heart tightened. Was there hidden story? Because, Denise closed eyes, tears sliding from well-maintained corner, Anna's father died saving Charles. This news exploded like bomb in my mind. That year, Charles was 10. Hiking with Dad, slipped, fell off cliff. Companion Uncle Anthony jumped without thinking to save him. Finally, Charles rescued, but Uncle Anthony never came up. Denise's voice full of painful recall. From that day, Charles changed. Became silent, nightmares nightly. Felt he killed Uncle Anthony. So, finding Anthony's only daughter Anna, he swore to repay the debt lifetime, hold up sky for Anna, no grievances. I stood dazed, mind blank. I never knew this past. In 10 years, I saw Charles's unconditional indulgence and protection of Anna, thought it love. Didn't expect behind heavy emotion was debt and guilt from life exchange. So, Vivian, understand? Denise looked, tears streaming. Charles doesn't not love you, he just can't. His shackles too heavy. He shelters Anna not because he loves her much, but can't let Savior's daughter go to prison. He can't pass his heart's hurdle. Not doesn't love, can't love. How ridiculous, how tragic reason. If he really loved me, how could he bear letting me take blame, bear all? In the end, in his heart, I was the one sacrificable, discardable. My heart not moved by this truth, instead deeper sorrow surged. Madame Denise, looking at her, calmly, even with such reason, can't be excused to hurt others. Anna killing is fact, Charles sheltering fact. Before law, all equal. He can't pass his hurdle, do I compensate my life for his no choice? Denise choked on my words, didn't expect me still so unreasonable after knowing. You. She trembled in anger, pointing, speechless half day. Said what I should. If nothing else, I'll go. I didn't want to entangle more. Whether love, guilt, debt, irrelevant to me. I turned, open door. Outside, unexpected person. Charles. He didn't know when arrived, how long listened outside. In black trench coat, much thinner, chin with blue stubble, looking haggard and dejected. He looked at me, deep eyes surging with incomprehensible storms. Shock, pain, regret, and a trace, plea. Our eyes met, air seemed frozen. Vivian. He hoarsely spoke, voice with unprecedented fatigue, can we talk? I sat with him in the end. In that oppressive room, Denise had tactfully left, leaving us silent opposite. Once, how I longed for such chance, sit properly like normal couple, chat. But now, between us only cold confrontation and endless resentment. I'm sorry. He broke silence first, these words said with extreme difficulty. I didn't respond, just coldly looked, like at a stranger. What Mom said is true. He looked, eyes with unprecedented vulnerability, these years, I've lived in guilt to Anna's father. Caring for Anna became my life's biggest duty. Thought if she lived well, it could lessen my guilt. So, for your guilt, you sacrifice me? I finally spoke, voice ice cold, Charles, by what right? By what right do you decide my life by your standards? I didn't. He eagerly tried to explain, I was just, panicked. I didn't expect the hit person would be. Grace. You didn't expect? As if hearing huge joke, I laughed out, tears flowing, Charles, stop pretending. Dare say when making me take blame, you really didn't know who the victim was. My question like sharp knife piercing him. His face paled instantly, lips moved but no word. His silence answered. He knew. From the start. He knew the killed was Grace who raised me, but still chose me to blame without hesitation. Because in his world, my pain, my kin, couldn't compare to his heavy duty and Anna's genius future. My heart felt instantly hollowed, no pain even, only boundless numbness and desolation. Charles, looking at him, clearly, you're the most selfish, disgusting person I've seen. My words like heavy hammer smashing his heart. He closed eyes painfully, body trembling slightly. Vivian, I know anything I say now is late. Opening eyes, they read, but I beg you, help me one last time. I couldn't believe my ears. At this point, still begging help? Anna, she's really not making it. His voice pleading, doctor says her mind completely collapsed. She recognizes no one, daily hugs canvas, paints non-stop that night's scene. Says she'll paint until the old woman forgives her. So? I asked coldly. So, I beg you, see her once. Looking, eyes full of plea, your grace is closest, tell her you forgive. Perhaps, she'll get better. Looking at this man, suddenly found utterly laughable. He wounded me thoroughly, destroyed everything, now delusions me playing saint, saving the murderer of my kin? How dare he ask? Charles. I slowly stood, looking down, listen well. First, Anna's life or death irrelevant to me. That's her deserved retribution. Second, I'll never, never forgive her. I want her in prison, repenting her crime's lifetime. Third, I paused, looking at his bloodless face, word by word, from today, you and I have no relation. What you owe me, oh Grace, I'll let law reclaim bit by bit. Finished, I didn't glance again, turned, strode out of the suffocating room. Didn't look back, but felt that burning desperate gaze following until I vanished in corridor. Out of the club, sky dark. City neon became blurry halos in my eyes. Deep breath, cold air into lungs, brought clarity. Ended. Between Charles and me, this 10-year absurd entanglement finally ended today with a bloody period. My phone rang, Ethan. Vivian, good news. Ethan's excited voice, Anna's psych eval overturned. Our evidence key, experts re-evaluated, determined she's faking illness to evade sanction. Also, Charles's witness flipped, testified Charles gave double price to deliberately err in identification. My tears couldn't hold, burst out. Grace, I silently, did you see? We won. This isn't end, just beginning. A trial beginning for Charles and Anna. On trial day, court entrance mobbed by reporters. As key witness, I sat in plaintiff's seat. Opposite, defendants Charles and Anna. Days unseen, they seemed changed people. Charles in prison uniform, hair buzzed, former arrogant favored son now haggard, eyes vacant, like soulless puppet. Anna even more disheveled. Also in uniform, face no past purity and refinement, only ashen. Shaking non-stop, eyes fearfully darting, like startled bird. When gaze met mine, she flinched, immediately lowered head, dared not look. In court, Ethan as my lawyer presented iron evidences. Charles's threat recording, Anna's exhibition confession video, Linda frame evidence, workers flip testimony. Each evidence like heavy hammer smashing on Charles and Anna, and on every auditor's heart. Charles's lawyers retreated before mountain evidence, no counter. Charles silent throughout, head low, expression unseen. Anna, hearing crimes revealed one by one, emotions collapsed again. Screaming, crying, said not intentional, knew wrong. But this time, no one sympathized. During judge's final statement, I saw Anna suddenly look up, near despair gaze at Charles, muttering, Charles, save me, save me. However, Charles didn't even glance. He slowly lifted head, gaze past all, landing on me. That gaze extremely complex. Regret, pain, unwillingness, and a trace, incomprehensible relief. Across the court, we gazed distantly. 10 years events flashed like movie in mind. First meeting, he descended godlike, pulled me from mire. I followed, carefully loving, thinking him my world. He took me to banquets, never introduced my identity. Passionate in bed, cold off. For Anna, unhesitatingly made me blame, die. 10 years obsession, following, in exchange for carefully planned scam, and shattered heart. Judge struck gavel, solemnly pronounced. Defendant Anna, guilty of hit and run, false accusation, multiple crimes, sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Defendant Charles, guilty of sheltering, perjury hindrance, multiple crimes, sentenced to 7 years. Shin Group for multiple violations, relevant departments to investigate. At verdict moment, Anna screamed, collapsed fainting. Charles unusually calm. He just deeply looked last glance, then mouthed. I read it. He said, sorry. Then, bailiffs cuffed him, escorted away. I watched his lonely back disappear behind court door, no revenge pleasure in heart, only endless emptiness. Out of court, sunlight brilliantly stinging. Reporters swarmed, mics and lenses at me. Miss Vivian, satisfied with verdict? Miss Vivian, next plans? Between you and Charles, Will. I answered no questions, just under Ethan and security escort, step by step through crowd difficultly. In car, through window, glanced back at solemn court. Everything ended. I won, but felt lost everything. Lost love I once lived for, lost my only kin. Car slowly started, leaving clamor far behind. I took phone, flipped to a photo. That was long ago, sneaky shot of Charles's sleeping face. In photo, brow slightly furrowed, sleep not peaceful, yet my memories most real him. I gazed long, then pressed delete. Vivian, forget the past. From now on, live for yourself.